Office. Well, joining me now is Benedict Rogers, who's Chief Executive of Hong Kong Watch and a writer on Asia. Really good to talk to you. The reason that I think it's important that we speak is because Vladimir Putin has met with his, and I quote, dear friend Xi Jinping. The two smiling leaders shook hands and posed for photos in Beijing. So clearly this axis of Russia and China, but Russia is very advanced in terms of approaching people in this country. More than 20,000 people in the UK have been approached covertly online by Chinese spies. This is according to the head of MI5.
Yes, that's right. I mean, I think we are seeing, firstly, the consolidation, the deepening of an axis of authoritarianism with Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. We've also seen recently Putin strengthening his relationship with North Korea, with Kim Jong-un, and we know about Russia's links with Iran. And at the same time, we're seeing this threat that MI5 have talked about today. And it's not the first time they've highlighted it. Ken McCallum has spoken about it in the past. The Parliamentary Intelligence and Security Committee earlier this year basically said that China was conducting a whole-of-state campaign against this country. So China, as well as Russia, are, as well as the Islamist terrorists, are all growing threats for us.
And just in terms of this, they made it very clear, the security services, this isn't just about China spying on what the government is up to, but also what tech firms are up to. The IP, the intellectual property rights of companies based in this country that essentially China wants to steal.
Yes, that's exactly right. And China has been doing that for some time, but I think there is a real threat to intellectual property. And you know, next month the government is hosting this summit on artificial intelligence and bringing together governments to strategize how we can both make the best of the opportunities that it presents, but also deal with the challenges that it raises. And there's a real question of what China's role should be in that, because it uses AI for very negative objectives.
And just in terms of China's involvement in this country, how much are we to blame in terms of sleepwalking into this? We're incredibly reliant on China in terms of cheaper goods. We like the idea of having cheaper goods into this country. So are we to blame for this?
Yes, I think we are partially. I mean, I think we were incredibly naive. You know, a few years ago in the David Cameron, George Osborne era, we had this so-called golden era of Sino-British relations where we invited China into sectors of real critical national infrastructure, and we were totally silent on the appalling human rights violations in China. That's changed slightly in the last few years, but there are indicators that we're slipping back towards that approach of business as usual, and I think that's extremely dangerous.
And just in terms of that, are the politicians heeding the warnings that are coming out about China?
I think they're starting to, and I think members of Parliament in Westminster, there's a growing number of MPs who show a concern about this, far more than there was a few years ago. I think in Whitehall, the problem is the government sending out mixed messages. Sometimes they saying the right things, and the warnings from the security services are very welcome in terms of waking people up. But at other times, the government seems to want to turn a blind eye to that and prioritize the business relationship. So I think there's been some awareness. People are waking up, but there's much more we need to do.
And just talking about the Middle East, of course, I talked about all of these interests, and the fact is you've got very differing interests here. Of course, President Putin has been ostracised very much by the West, but here he is with Xi Jinping trying to reinforce that relationship with China. He also met with Viktor Orban from Hungary as well. He's trying to create, I suppose, an anti-Western alliance so that he becomes even more powerful.
Yes, I think that's exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to create an alliance of authoritarians, and he really sees, and he's said this in speeches in the past, he sees the values of democracy, freedom, the rule of law as values that he strongly opposes and wants to undermine.
And so just in terms of where we go from here, what are the next steps in terms of, obviously the security services can warn about the rise of a threat from China, for example, indeed from Russia, but what will it take for actually the parliamentarians to listen and action this?
Well, I think parliamentarians, as I said earlier, are more and more waking up. It's government that I think really needs to act. I hope that parliamentarians on all sides who have long been raising this will increase the pressure on the government. And I think what the government should be doing is, it's obviously not realistic to say stop all trade with China because we're so interdependent, but we should be getting China out of our critical national infrastructure. We should be safeguarding our intellectual property. We should be diversifying our supply chains around the world so we're not dependent on China for key products. This was really noticeable during the pandemic where China gave us the virus and then we were dependent on them for PPE. And that was a situation we should never repeat.
Absolutely agree. Benedict, thank you very much indeed. Benedict Rogers, their Chief Executive of Hong Kong Watch and a writer on Asia. Time for a break. After the